Sorry that I'm late. Let's rock and roll. So, um, so as anyone who's listened to me for very long before knows, that something I like to talk about is the thing behind the thing behind the thing, or the hard problem of all perception. Because people talk about the hard problem of consciousness. You know, what do we do with consciousness? How do we make sense of it? And I like to broaden that out because, right, this reminds me of a little bit of what we talked about in that conversation with Jordan Daniel Wood Saturday, I think, that, when you talk about things in the abstract, right, you hold them at arm's length. And part of that, I think, is a negative psychological way to talk about that. I mean, you can talk about it positively or negatively, like anything. A negative psychological way to talk about that is that when it's at arm's length, right, it's not close. It's not close to your chest where it can hurt you, which reminds me of the New Testament talking about sinning against your body and sexual sin being against your own body, or that proverb of, can you hold fire close to your chest? Fire out there doesn't hurt you. It actually can help you, right? But then close to your chest, it's dangerous. And so that's a little bit of the positive way you can think about holding things at arm's length. But then also when you hold things at arm's length, they can't become part of you. This is a little bit of a riff on my mammonistic knowing out versus your Eucharistic knowing. It needs to become part of your body. Rilke, the point is to live everything. So, let's see, abstract. So the hard problem of all perception is that if you're talking about consciousness, it's out there, right? It's not, you could say you participate in consciousness, but I think a little bit from I would say baked in, assumed perspective of the modern world is that we're all, we've talked about this a lot, shout out to T-Grog. I think most religious people, most self-identifyingly religious people that are in the modern world are materialists. I mean, you've somewhat been, Tim Keller once talked about the gospel this way, but he said a lot of modern people have been inoculated against the gospel, but you've also been inoculated against the supernatural. It's just the air, it's the air you breathe. We are just kind of de facto materialists, I think, and you kind of layer on egoically, or we are raised to be religious, or you think you're religious, or you think you're a Christian, or you identify that way, and so you layer on this kind of supernatural layer that you don't really believe in. That's like where that Christian Smith term moral therapeutic deism comes in, is really your I mean, I don't even know if it's typically deism, but it's kind of, I have this Orthodox book by Father Stephen, what's his name? But it's the One Story Universe. Father Stephen, he's in Tennessee. Why can I not think of his last name? It's going to come to me. Anyhow, but his book is called The One Story Universe. So, we live in this divided world, which is one of my terms. I say divided. No, it's not Stephen DeYoung. It's Stephen Freeman. DeYoung got me to Freeman. And he's not as well known in this corner. I don't think people really talk about him, but he's in the Orthodox world, he's a well-known current contemporary priest and author. He's pretty cool. Stephen Freeman, right? And Chad, how do you know about Stephen Freeman? Thank you guys. Anyhow, but essentially it's that we live in a one-story universe. Like everything is present here. It's just like even the separations between, again, Coleridge, it's the philosopher's privilege to distinguish without division. So you can talk about material and immaterial, or matter and spirit, or visible and the Bible talks about things in terms of visible and invisible, perishable, imperishable, that which is passing away and that which is not passing away, or maybe coming into being. And even, what's that quote? There's a great quote from, I read it in Rupert Sheldrake's book, The Physics of Angels. Because again, that's one of those. The Physics of Angels is such a awesome baller book title because where he goes through the all the different great classic thinkers on angelology. So Dionysius, uh, Aquinas, and then I can't ever remember the poor woman because I'm a misogynist. JK, I'm not. But she came like a century after him. She's an abbess. Anyhow. Don't be coy, Foxman. So he's talking about my shirt. Sorry, that's it's a gray shirt. It's hemp. So The Physics of Angels is a great book because it's like a koan, or it's a way of talking about things that I think can upset and overturn and put you in a liminal space where you can. Very often the liminal spaces are where you are able to pass out of the closed circle of the Ouroboros, right? The trapped circle of the intellect. And when something breaks out of your system, it allows for revelation. It allows for unveiling for you to see things that you didn't previously see. It allows you to know what you maybe didn't want to know or couldn't know, because like Jordan Peterson talks about, air is what manifests. And air in the program is when it's showing you something new, something novel, some new revelation, which is essentially any proper knowing ought to be able to error correct, to repent, to grow, to evolve, to change your paradigms and see things in a new way. And that's air, the manifestation of air. And so let's go all the way. So the hard problem of consciousness, circling all the way back, notes from a tilt-a-whirl. You circle big, circle back in. You take it's not just consciousness that's its problem, it's perception, and that's just a different framing a little bit of it. When you perceive anything, and someone asked me the question in one of these, in a comment somewhere in some conversation I was having, is it just about sense perception? It's not just about sense perception. I'm not just talking about sight, taste. Oh, this was Luke Johnson. Touch. It's all emotions, ideas. You perceive ideas with the eye of your mind. You perceive love, you perceive hate, you perceive unity, you perceive any of these things that we tend to think of as, I like calling them invisible rather than abstract, because of that what's the word? Baked in materialism. Then you automatically go there, at least in a lot of your thinking, that these things aren't real. It's like some emergent property that's not real because of this latent materialism. They're not latent, but just baked in materialism. And but any of those perceptions are always mediated through you as the person. One way you could think of it is like Rupert Sheldrake talks about radio. He'll use the illustration of a radio or a television. And he's just like, there are all these radio waves and TV waves, they're everywhere. They're all over the place, but you can't see them. You can't see them until you have a radio, and then until you're attuned to the right frequency or the right channel. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff that's there, invisible, that you can't see, boom, all of a sudden you see. And it comes in when you're tuned correctly to the frequency. Everything's that way. But I would say your person, your own consciousness, because consciousness could maybe be like that. Consciousness is just this thing that's out there. But like, you are not conscious or self-conscious until there's a you. You are the filter, or the receptor. Let's say receiver, maybe, of any perception that you perceive. And this is why I say that the person is the locus and the nexus. It's the center of all perception. There's nothing outside of it. I would argue, as an abstraction, you could say that, well, things will happen. This is why, I don't know, I was thinking this the other day and I wasn't able to go into it, but like, I don't know if anyone's had this experience, but when I was a little kid, I think I've heard many people have this same experience. I was just like, if I leave a room or if I stop looking at something, does the thing cease to exist? And there's a bit of megalomania in there, but it's like the spiral. I've come back to it, and I would say yes. And I know that it seems completely insane and radical to a materialist, but I think it's the most basic. Um, it's like this quote, which is like the hardest thing to get someone to see is the thing that everyone has decided not to see. When I close my eyes, this doesn't exist anymore. And like you can abstract, like, well, it does exist in your mind, but like that's all a post hoc rationalization. The thing that you can most close to your chest know is that it's gone. And that's how everything is. And so I used to think, like, if I walk out of a room, do people stop to exist? And you get told this narrative that no, that's not true. But this gets into a little bit of the phrase that Luke said the other day too, like the existential, what was it? Existential epistemology. What was that term that he said? I think that's what it was. But it's just you are the center of everything that you can perceive. And it's also why what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. You are not going to see what you are not capable of seeing. It's like Peugeot spoke about this. Oh, I want to bring this piece in. And there's one other thing I want to say, and then I'll open it up. I want to talk about initiation, but I also want to talk about this thing that Peugeot said in his conversation with Rafe Kelly, which was phenomenal the other day. But he called it the Kairos moment. The moment of like when the time is appropriate, things just are. And the way it's when everything it's this simultaneous emanation and emergence, and the way that you describe it, I want to actually look it up because it's really wonderful. I need to put it in the notes in here. Scrolling through my YouTube history, what was it? I wrote tons of comments on here. Sorry about that. So the comment was the Kairos moment. He said this at 107. And I've heard him use this illustration before, and I can't remember what prompted it in this conversation, but he's used the illustration of like when it's time to do the dishes, it's time to do the dishes. And it's because everything, the idea, like, I need to do the dishes, the salience and the attention and the perception of the needing to do the dishes happens at the same time that everything, all the emergent phenomena come together at one time. Like when after dinner, the sink is full of dishes, they're starting to stink, when everything comes together, it's time to do the dishes. But Peugeot said, if you're out skiing on a mountain slope, it's not time to do dishes. And you just know that. Like, it's so obvious that like it seems stupid to even say it. But that's how everything works. That's why what you see here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. If you're standing on a mountaintop, it's not time to do dishes. But that's the same as like tuning your radio. You can't do that with the will either. You do it by your attention over time, which is kind of related to that Jordan Peterson free will determinism clip where he talks about your freedom as it relates to time. So the further a decision is away from you, the more freedom you have, because you can put your attention and your abstraction and your focus towards something in the future, in the distance, that's potential, because it's not act yet. You haven't done it. It's out there. This is 3 months away. You can really align. You can then align with your will and your intellect toward that goal, that when you move toward that goal, that Kairos moment, boom. But when it's time, it happened. It's over. Like when you decide to, I don't know, what's a good illustration of this? You decide to save toward a trip that you want to go on, but you can't afford it. And so you focus your attention and your will and your desire towards this plan, towards all this potential, towards this abstract stuff, and you either move toward it or you don't. But then all the emerging phenomenon that move toward that goal that you're setting your emanation, your intellect, and your attention on, if those things come together in a harmony, it happens. But like it doesn't happen just with your mere emanation if all the emergent reality doesn't come together. So that's the Kairos moment. And that's why it's like it's not straight determinism. It looks like determinism, but determinism has certain assumptions about time and attention and causality that's very limited, that assumes a linear progression of time, and it assumes a mechanistic causation stuff, which we don't really understand. And also, and it's connected to this, is the initiation. So all of this is abstract, but I'm gonna make it really personal. So something else Peugeot has said, which is very true, is you cannot understand anything from outside. You can only ever understand things through initiation. So like trying to, this is the illusion. Delusion. I'll say delusion of objectivism, is that you think, again, with Paul's monarchical vision, the great term, from the outside, you can analyze something with your discursive logic and reasoning. The objective subject, again, this is the subjective objective divide, where things are at a distance, which is how nothing exists, because things exist in the person through the apprehension of the person. You are the one that's doing both of these things. And you think you can understand it from outside, but you can't, because you're not standing in the place to understand it. You can't see into it in the way that is to know it. In 1 Corinthians, when St. Paul says, knowing as you are known, you cannot see. What you see and hear depends a lot on where you're standing and the kind of person you are. You can't understand it from outside. It's the same way that like any relationship or a marriage or a language, I can't understand Chinese from not being initiated into Chinese. That seems obvious. I can understand guitar without being initiated into guitar. I have a slight initiation into guitar or to Chinese. Like maybe you're initiated and you've stood in the morphic field into the, you're attuned into the waves, like close enough. You're closely attuned enough to where you can pick up some of the sound, but there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of static because you're not attuned to it enough. But like there is a degree to which, like, say I go move to China and I live there for a month or 2 months. Am I going to be fluent in Chinese and be able to read in Chinese? No. But I'm going to know more than I know now. And I'm going to be more attuned to it. And there'll be little things that start to pop up and I pick up on. And so you're slightly attuned to it because of where you're standing, because you're having these Kairos moments. But then all of a sudden, like fluency or something, all of a sudden it'll just click. And that doesn't mean you know it as well as you can ever know it. But all of a sudden it's just like, holy cow, I know Chinese or guitar or whatever. All of a sudden you can just play. All of a sudden you're in love. And it just seems like it's an epiphany or a revelation. And then all of a sudden it just happens. But it's both of these things at the same time. You can't understand that outside of initiation. So like, for example, me understanding Judaism or another religion or whatever, the myth of modernity, that you can objectively analyze the a la carte kind of buffet of religions from the outside, is dumb. It's just dumb. It doesn't work. And so like, what I want to push with that though too is like knowledge even works this way. To think that you can understand knowledge in this static definitional way, where like there are these terms and there are these definitions. Number one, you don't even understand language and how language works, because language is grammar, which is magic. It's a kind of magic. Shout out to that Alan Watts Alan Moore has this great thing on magic, which I'll maybe just read. It's fantastic. If I have it in my notes, I'll come back to that. But like you can't understand anything. This is why like when PBK said, and even Peugeot has said this 10 years ago, he would have been talking about this and nobody would have understood what he's talking about. And now people can. And part of that is because we culturally and collectively in the zeitgeist, and also personally and individually, are standing in a different place where a lot of what Peugeot is talking about makes sense. But that's the same for any person. If you want to really understand, shout out to my boy Cal, I know he's here. If you want to really understand where a person is coming from, and Cal is like, So I'm just going to say this because I love my friend, but Cal is one of the most beautiful human beings I know, and he embodies this very well. Is that Cal looks into? He was telling me about all this true crime stuff the other day, and he was and he likes to study like mass shooters and things because he has this the lines of judgment and unconditional love that most people have. Like many people are like beyond the fold. It's just like you're a mass shooter, you're beyond the fold. You're unforgivable. You have crossed a line where it is like you are beyond reconciliation and love. and Cal will mention that the mass shooter at Sandy Hook, I think. Is that who it was? I can't remember. The details I'm not good at, but he'll talk about that, whose father said, I've gotten to the place with my son where I wish he had never been born. Cal is the kind of person who will, in this kind of personalist love, he's trying to train his organ of love and forgiveness so much that he will look into these horrific things and try to understand, not to justify in some sick way what they did, but try to understand in a kind of attempt at what I'm saying of personalist knowing who this person was and where they were standing. Where were they in their kairos moment where they felt like this had to happen, and it did. Where was it? How can I love them? How can I give unto myself so much, empty myself so much out of all my judgments to put myself where they were standing in order to forgive them? Man, what does that sound like? That sounds a lot like Jesus, who made himself, he who knew not sin became sin so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Cursed is he who is hung on a tree. I will put myself in their place out of love. And I know this is here's the thing. Woe to you when people think well of you. Luke 6:26. This is like, it seems like it's a justification of evil. I'm not trying to do that. I'm really not trying to do that. And this is where the personalist knowing, I ask in the same way that Cal has done this for me actually really well. In the same way that Cal will do this for other people. Do this for me. Do this, like, this is the Vervaeke, agape other people, steelman, agape other people's, what they're trying to say, even if they're saying it poorly. Or like Eric Weinstein's island rules, like, which I don't want to go into, but these are all shout outs, and you can look them up if you find them. If it's part of the mosaic that pops out to you, go into it. But you have to love someone else so much to, like, in order to understand something. Because if you understand something by initiation, like my buddy Preston said this once, or he had a friend who said this, Preston Sprinkle. He said, like, you almost have to get to the point, or it's that Tim Keller video that I've talked about a lot, where you almost believe, and arguably you do have to believe what someone else is saying in order to understand what they're really saying. And so this is where I say this with T-Grog. I see this, and he's in here like this. Yahweh is evil, like, I don't like that. But if I'm putting my money where my mouth is, I have to try to put myself and stand in the place where he is in order to understand him, which is really hard. It's really easy. Life is not tried, it is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire. Garth Brooks. I should have sang it. If I really want to love the way that I think, if I want to know as I am known, knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. If anyone thinks he knows, he does not yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone is known by God, he's loved by him. This is how you will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Even your enemies. My buddy Jason, if hell exists, you're going there as a Christian. You're going to harrow hell like Christ, because I wish I were accursed for the sake of my brethren, St. Paul. I am the chief of sinners. I don't know that Christians, and this is to T. Grog's point, I don't think Christians often truly believe in the way that they ought to, in this 1 Corinthians way, the stuff that they say. I don't think that we do, or we would live differently. So I think this is our way out of the delusion that we're in of modernity, is this personalist knowing. It is entering into your own self-emptying out of such a radical kind of love that you know as you are known, even with those, to quote another quote that I love, and then I'll open this up, the last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. It's a great quote. All right. I'm going to open this up, see who's here, go through some comments. This is not going to be a popular... This is not going to be popular. Forgiving your enemies is not like a popular thing. It is in the abstract. It's not in reality. People, you know, we go to church and we like to talk about these things like forgive your enemies. Yay. People don't like it. Like think of the people that are most repulsive to you, that most anger you truly, and then think about forgiving them. Good luck. And you'll probably need more than luck. Because, you know, I'm triggered. I'm often triggered by things. So let's see. Wesley is in here. No, I didn't know. Okay, Wesley. So here, I want to make another point here because I see my boy Wesley is here. Wesley, you know what? By the way, if you're here, my buddy Jason sent me this little clip of when you went on to Jacob Federici's channel, which I think they played the clip the other day because you were talking about, I think this is you. If it's not, forgive me. But where you talking about, you know, all languages and whatever, and then Jacob said something to you quickly in Farsi and you didn't know what he was saying, and he said, okay, see, you're wrong, and he just like closed out. Here's the thing I would encourage everyone, because here's the thing, I also need to do an episode, one of these live streams on heresy, because I really want to work that out, and if this is where that conversation goes, we can do that too. Because when is the proper discernment of a body, and when do you excommunicate someone or anathematize someone, or when do you exclude with hopes of future inclusion? Because I'm not a zero-sum absolute exclusivist. I'm a universalist. So I see like whatever Wesley here, these kinds of comments, my friend, my boy, my man. The vision shall be open to you on the 21st. Here's the thing. This is what I would say. This is where I'm leaning right now in regards to heresy, at least as it applies to these live streams. And this, you know, hopefully I can live up to my own standard and model it well. If you are not attuned to the resonance of the conversation or what's happening, and that evolves and changes as different people come in. Like if someone else comes in here, the spirit of this conversation will change because someone else is here. It's not just me and my consciousness congress and my own unity of multiplicity, which is me and my ideas and my awareness. It will change because someone else is here, or it should, because there is a way in conversations that you can insist on your own way, which is a hyper masculine way of having a conversation where you just like keep saying the same thing over and over and over, and you won't listen to what someone else is saying. And so I would say, Wesley, if you keep doing that, like if you keep making comments like this in all caps, insisting on your own way and not trying to listen, not trying to learn, not asking questions and welcoming in with hospitality what someone else is saying, then you're going to get timed out. And if you keep doing it, then you will just get timed out until the live stream's over. And eventually you'll get banned because you're not interested in dialogue, in play, in engaging. You're just interested in colonizing and speaking your own mind, which is pretty radically egoic. Welcome, Gavin.
Speaking of the egoic person.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
So I don't know what's going on. Andrew's here. I'm going to keep going through comments, but I can't hear you. Are you hearing me? Am I totally silent?
I hear you. Do you hear me?
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I hear you.
Can hear me. All right. Sandy, welcome. Andrew.
I could hear Gavin.
I'm going to read through some comments, and other people can just say whatever you want to say.
I think they can hear me, but we can't. You can't hear me.
What is happening?
Luke.
You still can't hear Gavin?
I can hear you, Sandy.
Else.
Luke can't hear me. That's
Luke
just
is
you.
in another realm. He's got to
That's right.
Okay. Sorry. I got my sound all jacked. What a dumb. Let's see. Input, output. Here we go.
Test.
Now I got it. Good grief. Sorry, guys.
How are you, Sandy?
I got it.
Good. Very tired though. It's dry
Why-
in my apartment, and I'm rehydrating still.
All right, let's go. Haters will call it solipsism. This is my boy. This is one of my alter egos of my boy Modus Trollens. Solipsism. Yeah, this is like people think that this like hyper inwardness because of the subjective objective divide, they'll call that solipsistic, where you're like collapsed in your own self. I think that's when you're collapsed on the false self. But a true inward journey, which I think is integrity, is actually the only way out of solipsism. I think objectivism is solipsistic. So there we go.
I like being able to hold two contradicting things at the same time.
Yeah.
So yes, solipsism, but also something else.
Yeah.
Is solipsism related to anything else in terms of? Because I'm reading, I was interested in what the definition there means. I mean, I'm telling Garth that I'm dry. That's true, but I'm also half stuck in a dream I was in, and so like that's why I wonder is when you talk about being in different places, you know, or I'll think about that in terms of dissociation. You know, and I was in some charismatic style ministries where intercessory prayer and how you engage things not directly, you know, in physical relationship to yourself. How do you do that? And so I've been thinking about what's the difference between when you allow yourself to sort of listen somewhere outside of your, is solipsism related to any of those terms in any weird ways? Or is that just I mean, one sounds like a religious thing. Dissociation is a mental health context word. Prayer is a church thing. When you were I was wondering when you were talking, what you were describing sounds like it kind of overlaps some categories, and you're trying to get at how to frame something so that you can put it into one context. But does it? Like, what's its relationship to stuff? And why solipsism would come to mind?
So the way that I would relate to the question that you have there is kind of what I was trying to get at with that Kairos moment.
Yeah.
The Kairos moment is when all of a sudden things come together in a unity of multiplicity, right? Which is when all these disparate things come together as one thing, and you're like, oh, I get it. That's the epiphany. That's the revelation. And so like even like any sort of like definitional understanding, when you're seeking understanding, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to piece together with your attention all these disparate parts and see what you can't see. And then all of a sudden, I think this is really complicated stuff philosophically.
And I apologize if it's jumping like 20 comments down the thing. Don't distract from where you were.
No. That's fine.
It's a question.
No, weird. That's fine. This is kind of like what I was talking about. You have to this is what I love about live streams, because because to me, like I've been saying in Paul Vanderklay's videos recently, Paul, I think, is increasingly realizing, I think, and having greater clarity about what he wants to be doing with his channel and what he thinks the goal of YouTube is, which is this community building kind of relational thing. And that's what it's always been to me. So that's what I was talking about before. Like when I was trying to encourage Wesley to have better hospitality and not just try to push his own ideas so much, is that when other people come in, it's not just like, I mean, I sat here and talked for however long, right? Almost 30 minutes. Like I spoke a lot. Now it's time for other people to come. And,
I enjoy it.
What's that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I said I enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. No, that's totally fine, Sandy. I think that so when you name something, like Paul has talked about this, like when something like woke, right? Woke was this spirit, this emergent spirit that was starting to arise, and then all of a sudden people were like, what's happening? And then all of a sudden now we have this term that's just like woke. And when you say woke, people know what that means, because there was this kairos moment. Everything, I mean, but this is also where it comes in, and the problem with the name, where I was trying to get at with idolatry, and what Jordan Peterson or what Chad talks about with our lightsaber thing of what this corner is, where you say, what do you mean by that? So there's always this relationship with any sort of name where there's a kairos unity in that, where people are like, woke, okay, I think I know what that is, but it's also not that. Because
okay, I'm going to tell you two things briefly. One, I don't still say to myself that I'm satisfied that I know what woke is. I've had a conversation with Mark where I might possibly have a better understanding of it, but it depends on what others also use it. And the other thing was, when you go to your Kairos moment, the ministry I was in had a 4-point for their intercessory prayer people. They had this 4-point check, like, is it in the Bible? Like, in some respect, is it in line with, that was a Christian ministry. I'm actually, anyway, and they would say, is it in line with what, Jesus said or whatever? What was it? Are other people in agreement with it, which is kind of what you were talking about in the hospitality thing? You have to put others. Do you see evidence of this somehow? You can't just state something is a whatever and not see some kind of dynamic pattern around it that confirms in a group of people, that it's in line with what God would want or be saying to you in some sense, because the object isn't just to get a label or an idea or a whatever. It's to come to some kind of shift in, oh, this is what we're doing. This is what we need to focus on. This is what's happening. This is all those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird for me to jump back and affirm, seeing as I'm hanging out with the Noahides at the moment, which are the people looking at, look, Jacob's channel stuff. Anyway. That's it. You guys talk.
So no, I think that's exactly right. And that's I would say that's one of the big strengths of what TLC is in this little corner, and why I'm so anti-confessionalism, not necessarily confessions if they're held to correctly, right? The law is just if you use it lawfully. I'm not against the law, but it can be bad if you don't use it the way that it's intended. And so I'm not, one of the reasons TLC is so cool is that we have a huge diversity of opinions. That's what allows this to be what it is. If it was, this is like what Orwell talks about with groupthink. I think most modern religious and irreligious groups are possessed by groupthink, because they've systematized their community through the institution to exclude the people who disagree. But if you exclude the people that disagree, you can't even really see what you think, because you just have a bunch of people repeating the same things over and over and over again, thinking they all mean the same thing, when they have no contrast to discern if they even mean the same thing. This is why even saying something like woke, what does woke mean? Well, it's going to mean something a little different for you than it does for me. But there has to be something related in you and in me for us to even be talking about the same thing. You know what I mean? And sorry, Andrew, I have you muted because you had side noise, but I think you can unmute.
Yeah, I just driving in my truck. Yeah, driving in my truck is just a little bit of side noise. But no, I think that's the hard part of this objective-subjective divide. That, I mean, there are things in the subjective that you can objectively, like concepts we all share, that you can make sense of subjectively. But sometimes when you override those concepts that we all share, it starts getting a little foggy, and then it gets scary that, oh, now you're in solipsism. But I mean, I think that's what, not to be Immanuel Kant is trying to do, is oh, we have these concepts, we go by these concepts, but there's still things contradictions we still are led to in our subjective experience. But I mean, I think that Kairos moment too, like you're saying, I was thinking of Kierkegaard, where time is linearly played out, but that Kairos moment is when you retroactively make sense of everything that was played out. So you actually look backwards. you actually are connecting all of the dots at that point, and that Kairos moment is a bringing together of like a symbolization of all those concepts or problem, things that you maybe struggled with before, but that Kairos moment brings to light and almost life of everything you had before. But I think that's the problem is as you live through life, then again, linearly, sometimes there's stuff that's missed or unconsciously pushed out by the system or whatever system you're living into. And those unconscious biases will always come back to jack up the system. And then that is then when people fall into this, dogmatic, no, the system says this, the Bible says this.
Yeah.
What, you know what I'm saying? And then it's like beat you down with it. But that's the other point is I think that's the hard point that, I listen to a lot of Lacan, and that's his point is, well, then we say, oh, that's a problem. Deconstruction, oh, throw that all off. But Lacan's point is that like you're a biological being, but you're also a linguistic being. And that gap, that opening in all of our contradictions, there's always an opening. And that opening is the key to forming desire. That opening is the desire. That desire then is what actually leads us as persons to keep going down these things and just desiring, but we don't know, that lack is the key and the opening, not the closing of something. And that's really hard to like wrap your mind around, is that this lack and negative taking out of the system and like following those repressed things is actually can open up the system again.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll say something quick about that, and then I want to invite these other cats that just popped in to talk. But and this comment. So, like, to illustrate this comment, when are you going to actually engage the conversation? If you pay attention, conversations are rarely about Christianity, but it's all I insist upon. Well, it's the language of Christianity. Again, this is what I know. This is what I've been initiated in. It's what I value, and it is the language I use. However, when there are people like you, Brian, or like T-Grog in here, I want that. I don't want people just sitting around using a bunch of Christianese, talking past each other when they think that they're all talking about the same thing, but when they really have a different understanding of all these things. Because I really do believe in the God of your own understanding. And so you need pushback, you need the tension, you need the love to engage the other to be able to understand these things in the way that you're supposed to understand them. So I want that. And I'll try to, and I mean, I can try to talk about things without Christian language, but that's just, it'd be like somebody saying me, like, you're really speaking in English a lot, and I'd rather that you use Chinese. Sorry, I know English barely. Like, I always say English is my second language, and it's see, yeah, thank you. And I can't do anything with that. But all right, so Tayo, Ron, T-Grog, what up?
Hi guys. Hey, I really enjoy your stuff. I understand a little bit of it, but I enjoy all of it.
That's kind of how we are with most things.
I don't understand any of it.
But, hey, I got something to say, if I may. Forgiveness for me, going back a little bit, has been like a teeter-totter. When I forgive, I get forgiven, and I actually experientially feel it in my spirit. And just, I'm putting it out there, forgiveness, I found, is not an emotion. It is almost like a legal decision. Like having a gun, like you just drop it, you go, God, I'm not going to deal with them. You deal with them. Now also deal with my heart in the same kind of mercy and help my heart to feel it as you feel it. And I've seen it really work. I mean, without it, I would be a mess. The only reason I bring that up is because I saw you talking, and I was talking with, I think, Sandy in the comments about forgiveness. So I just wanted to put that out there because it's
Question
you guys, you talk
on that.
Yeah,
I can't answer. Because when you put it out there, like, that's one of the issues that I had with church during the time I was leading up to my divorce, that it's hard to make it's hard to make good mutual decisions when you're also standing up against a belief that you said something about it works. There's
For
an
me,
element
yeah.
of that kind of perception of what forgiveness is or its purpose that I find in some places. Mostly, I was asking church and ministers because that's where I was at the time. But when you say it works, like, I do hear you
What does that
saying
mean?
some kind of personal impact on you. And that's a
Yeah.
real thing that I would not question. But if somebody says it externally to me as a third party,
Mhm.
A, it doesn't have the same utility. And B, it definitely didn't have the same outcome or impact. So I'm curious about that topic. And
That sounds like justice, the topic of justice.
Well,
Mhm.
justice and forgiveness
Mhm.
to me are close, inextricably intertwined, I think. And it's very, I agree. Like, you can't, forgiveness is a great example of the kind of personal reality, I think, behind everything is just like, yeah, somebody telling you to forgive someone. Okay.
yeah, but
That's not
it's
going to work.
hardwired into some of the, it's not the beliefs. What do you call those people where you say or do things in an organization? This was particularly church. But there are expectations that, like, if this, then that will always this. But we know it doesn't.
Mhm.
There's not that flow to things.
Mhm.
And when you mention justice, I'm far more settled with the concept of justice than I was with the concept of forgiveness at the time, because forgiveness, which is funny because I just replied very positively to the concept of taking something away. On the one hand, it's implied that forgiveness removes something. But there's a complex interaction around that place that we assume the component parts and what's going to happen. Whereas justice takes things away in a different sense. And when I went to the lawyer I picked a really kind lawyer and basically said, whatever else happens, we've got to all get out alive. We've been through enough. And justice is something you give yourself. I don't think we really, really delve into those places enough where I was in church. I had an apology from the minister for one thing that happened, because he was basically like, oh, what we thought would happen didn't happen because our understanding of what was going on was wrong. Meant a ton. But I hear other places too. Like, it's not specific to that arena. It's just, I happen to live it out there. And you're right. There's something with justice and forgiveness. There's got to be engagement and balance and other things. Sorry.
I bet T. Grug would probably have some things to say, because it's like, if you just go with that magical thinking, then justice can get ignored, and yeah, there can be a lot of terrible things that happen. They just get ignored. I don't know. It just seems like an interesting intersection for, where we have to be careful with magical thinking.
Well, that's part of the case of this kind of ethical thinking, frankly, is that it's when you get into religious-based thinking, like, I know it's not, supposedly this has nothing to do with Christianity, but the Apostle Paul's telling people don't get married because the end of the world's coming. I just think when I was a Christian, I used to privilege all these texts, like these texts were some special sauce or something. I had no idea that there were hundreds of gospels and epistles that didn't make it into the canon because the Orthodox said, well, we don't like this, we don't like that. So you're privileging these texts written by people who thought the world world was, you know, very young. They thought that God created all the animals de novo. They thought they had no idea the universe was huge. They thought that there were 7 heavens. They thought all these crazy things, which we know objectively are false. So why privilege what they think about ethics?
I mean,
They really don't speak to anything we
is that connected to justice?
with.
Is it connected to justice?
Well, justice. I would say in my forming of opinions of justice, justice is sociological. I mean, there are societies that thought slavery was a-okay, polygamy was a-okay, you know, torturing people to death was a-okay. So we have improved in the sense that humans have more empathy for other people now, for criminals, for people who are, you know, mentally ill. We have more empathy now because we have more of an understanding of human nature, and that people have problems and they have issues, and they're, you know, so just, you know, flailing them alive or boiling them in oil as they did in Christian countries for, you know, in medieval Europe, you know, we thought, well, you know, that's really not a good thing.
Do you have a story of whenever you had to do the justice or the forgiveness thing?
I would say this, that I would go like Buddhism, forgive your enemy, forgive people, because if you don't forgive them, it actually hurts you.
Do you think that does that work for you?
It hurts you because you're obsessed with it and you can't let it go out of your mind. So they're living rent free in your head. And I would say, just from a pragmatic standpoint, it makes sense to forgive people and not be hateful or angry, or you know, understand that human beings have a lot of flaws. A lot of stuff that happens to them is not fault. I mean, they're raised in a terrible environment. They have genetic defects. They have all these problems, and so it makes sense to forgive people because people make mistakes. They're fallible. They're screwed up. They, you know, they're apes.
So
They're
Tigran,
modified apes, literally.
I think Tayo wants to say something, but also,
Sure.
like, all that, to me, all that's, in my experience, all that's abstract, and I can tell myself all these things. It doesn't make me forgive someone. It's deeper. It's deeper than all these ideas out here of like resentment is like drinking poison and hope the other person dies. All that, like, all those kinds of things are like, you know, pithy
Well,
things.
this whole idea of deepness is, I find, very confusing, because what does that even mean, deepness? So it's some internal mental state that you have, or the idea of deep, it's a metaphor. I understand that. Like deep, like it's unclear, it's murky, like deep water, deep mud, deep what? I mean, it's like, okay, you have an internal state. You can't quite sort it out because we're not very good at intuiting our internal, we're bad at figuring out what's going on in our heads. Okay. So we're bad at it. So you try to go through therapy, or I don't know, ketamine or psychedelics or something. I don't know. I mean, what I was taught was you can't influence your emotions directly. You have to go through the cognition to influence your emotions. Okay. So if somebody stomps on my foot and I turn around and I'm going to punch them out, I look at them and they're blind. And I go, oh, well, they're not responsible because they're blind. They didn't know what they were doing. So my cognition changes my emotion. Right.
So I'm going to push back on that a wee bit. I brought up the link that was mentioned between justice and forgiveness. we're pretty sure that my ex, who was abusive, has borderline personality disorder.
Right.
The son that he almost could get to kill me from lashing out is deaf and has autism.
Right.
Neither of those things are excusing. And some of the ways you're describing things is you're not asking us to forgive, you're asking us to excuse. And if forgiveness and excuse is different.
I think
It
that's a good-
challenges us. It pushes into something inside of us that makes us be extremely honest with ourselves and with others about a lot more stuff than just, like how you were referencing having the privileged verses and stuff. There's a lot of ways we approach things that give privileged status to certain things, and we don't realize it unless we're willing to actually lean into the battle that we're having with some of the concepts. Do you guys mind if I read a list of chapter headings? I was one of the books we did in the Jewish Book Club this year was the Kabbalah of Forgiveness. And I had a hard time with some of these chapters because of wanting to be a kind, forgiving person, and also trying to be a person who honors justice, fairness, and what was actually good for the people around me in the same situation. I found these kind of hard but interesting. Excuse me. It's a book written by a guy, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, like 1500s, or all forgiveness is excusing. Okay. Anyway, in the first level, they walk you through levels of discussion on this and levels you're supposed to practice doing. And the first one is talking about the king who endures insult, which is the fact that God, he endures more than we do in essence. He allows a lot of stuff. He endures us, he endures all of the insults that we lay out there. The second level was let it go for now, which means you don't have to agree to, and Hezi can comment if I'm butchering these because he would know what they actually are. So it's kind of, I took it in that place of saying, I always understood that this was an all or nothing thing. You get told to forgive, forgiveness is going to work the work, and boom, finished. And when it wasn't, boom, finished, then I had issue with it. But this says, let it go for now. Take care of it personally. I don't actually remember what that one is, which means I probably want to go back and reread it. Remember the family. I had trouble with that one because there's a lot of good in remembering family, and I have a lot of the opposite, but there's still good there. So I'll go back and reread that one too. Release the anger is the fifth level. That's not, in my understanding, the same as forgiveness, but it's letting go of that, like place burning in me about it. And who makes your lunch is the sixth level. He was talking about his wife when, you get at loggerheads and you just, you want to kind of lose your cool about something, but she still made his lunch every day, even if he didn't deserve it, or even if, what they had this. And I'm like, there's those places too. Seventh level talks about a knot is stronger. And I forget that one too. There's a lot I got to go back, but I'm assuming it's kind of like what we often talk about, not going it alone, knot is stronger. Level 8 is maintain a core of love, no matter what else is going on, still maintain at least a core of love. I think you guys started with talking about love. It's a difficult topic because we muck it up a lot, but maintain it. Bury the past. Not easy, but do the right thing anyway. Even if it's perceived as undeserved or whatever you're going through, do the right thing anyway. Do more for those who do more. So often I remember we would get told you do more for people who are less, which is what I was pushing against when you talk about if you're undeserving, you deserve to have more, because you've got less, those who have should do more kind of thing. But this is actually for people who are doing more, do more for them to support them because they're going to do more, remember where they came from. That was a big thing in my relationship with my ex. I spent most of 40 years picturing him as the little kid that so often kind of got in the way of some of his decent adult processing because he hadn't dealt with some stuff back there. And yeah, so I would agree. Remembering where people come from is really important. And then at the 13th level, it's that you're supposed to reach the moment of innocence. I definitely have to go and reread that one. But I kind of like how this book broke it down into it isn't an all or nothing immediate. You completely get this. It's, you know, one sentence, but there's a lot to it. I kind of liked being forced to look at it that way.
Thanks for sharing that, Sandy. Oh, so many thoughts in my head. When I first came on, I had something else I wanted to say, and then I listened some more, and then another thing came up, and now it's all over the place. But I think I want to first start with Lucas Gunn, but I wanted to ask him some questions about his model of the personal being the supreme way of relating to others. Because I think when Luke says the personal, what I hear is the story, the storied person and the storied being. And
Right.
I think that model maps onto a few of those title headings you just read out, Sandy. And T. Grog. So I was thinking about Guy and Chad's conversation, which was after Guy had this conversation with Paul. And Guy was presenting this model of, it was a model that talks about the two different ways of relating, which is either model or I think the other one is story. So the model front would be T-Grog. There's a model of what religious people believe and how they behave and what they talk about in your head. There's a model of how atheists and Muslims and other religious people behave, that we've all got a model of how these people in this category fit in. And often when someone's a few, let's say six degrees of separations from you, so they're not your blood relations, they're not your close friends, and they're not acquaintances. So a friend of a friend of a friend, for example, you're more likely to relate to them on the model plane because you don't quite know them enough to know how they differ from the model that they appear to be in. And I don't think you can escape the modeling phase of relating to people. I think the modeling phase of relating to people helps us to extend our cognition and helps us to can be more kind to people depending on what your model is of what they are, because you can't know everyone's story, but you do have to find a story in your mind that allows you to be kind to others. And I think one of the things Sandy read out was knowing where people came from. And I think, again, that goes back to story. So I find it's more loving to relate to people based on their story. And on that plane, forgiveness becomes easier. Those are some of the thoughts that I had. I'll let other people speak.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I mean, I don't know if I would characterize it story. I kind of like to make the distinction between story and narrative. The narrative is like the ideas, the story is the reality behind the narrative. So like when I talk about personal thing, it's what I am and where I'm standing. I am most initiated. The thing I'm most initiated in is me, which is the unity of everything about me, my whole story, my ideas, my body, my intellect, my family, my culture, every part of me, my entire multiplicity, the unity of it is me. And it is the thing that I am most initiated in, that I know, but I also don't know a lot of it, because that's what psychology is about, right? That's why we have subconscious and we go to therapists, is because I would say because we suppress the truth and unrighteousness about ourselves and about God and what we can know about Him. And
That's the Apostle Paul again.
Yeah, it is. Again, I can't help but be me, T. Grog. I'm pretty
No.
initiated.
I'm just saying. That's his opinion. So
what's the opinion?
The Apostle Paul's opinion that we suppress the truth and unrighteousness. That's his take on it.
But if you take it the way I just said it, I mean, you don't have, like, again, lose all the metaphysical claims. Do you lie to yourself?
Yeah, and that's why you can't. That's why you can't trust these internal feelings and my thoughts about myself. You have to be very careful about that because science has done a lot of work on this about people's internal mental states and how they track with reality. False memories, false opinions about yourself. People generally think they're smarter than they are, they're better looking than they are, they better than they do. They have all these opinions about what they're like, and they don't track with reality. So the idea that you can just intuit all these things out of your own mind and all this stuff, it's just wrong. People have a lot of commonsensical views that are just wrong and factually wrong. And that's the danger. That's the danger.
Let's not deal with the rightness or wrongness of people having.
Well, I'm just saying incorrect.
So, yeah, he's
right or wrong in a sense. They're incorrect.
People
fall in love with bad people. Huh?
So there are definitely places like that. But then, so in between the places that you and Luke are describing, what do we do? Like, one of the things that jumps out to me when you say that, there was one time, sorry, you get a lot of ex-husband stories out of me. There was one time, super smart man, very, but anyway, he was upset at something that had happened. And I don't remember what was happened. I remember what stuck with me was the fact that he was saying, he was angry because whatever it was that he said that I had done or said. And he was quite adamant about this. And then I said something about, well, we did here and here. And here. I watched his face shift because he's ticking off the timing boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's going, yeah, we this. That doesn't make sense, does it? And I went, no, that's what I've been saying. He says, because this happened and this happened, which means you couldn't have said that before.
So he was wrong about what he thought you said. Is that what you're saying?
Because he was processing from a place.
He was wrong.
It was a different place in his brain.
No one's
but
argued.
He was also right when he analyzed.
He had a set.
And he stopped.
He has
both.
Yeah. So
and that's
people make stuff up in their heads. That's true. They do. And especially if they have a cluster B personality disorder, that's a very serious mental illness.
All right, let's make space too for like Andrew and Noah hasn't spoken yet, so we can go back and let's not get caught up in a.
No, I just was going to throw in that.
People have the weakness and the strength. You can't pick one or the other. You can't say they can speak.
Right, I understand that. People have strengths and weaknesses. Sure.
Andrew, Noah, your turn.
Okay, I was just going to say that I think just to hit on that, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it doesn't speak to it, but like the point that we live in models and then we also live in stories. But the point would be that, I mean, again, this is what I find interesting in Hegel is that the model lets us down and then the story lets us down. But we keep going back and forth dialectically because we're let down again and we go, oh, that's not it. The universal is not it. My particular, it doesn't speak to my particular. But then you go back to the particular and then you go, well, this isn't quite it either. Zizek makes a point where he saw a movie and he sees the movie and he goes, oh, they left this out of there's a point in the book that it's in the movie. So then he goes to the book and reads the book and he's like, oh, it's not, something was missing in the movie and the book. And the point is that, no, it's this dialectical flipping in between that is the subject that it is. I mean, that's the point is her husband's signifying chain. It maps a world for him and he lives into that world. But then, yes, at points that world is let down and it's like, oh, well, it's false. But I mean, to some degree, yes. To another degree, no, he lived a world in it. But I mean, the point is this dialectical back and forth. But this negative that is brought out that makes you turn to another form, and you're growing as a person. But I'll leave it.
All right, Tigrog, you just left a comment in a private chat saying that Eagle says much crazy stuff, read him instead. But that was without engaging what Andrew was saying about what he liked about Eagle. He wasn't affirming all of Eagle's.
Well, of course that. I understand that.
So you can't just say, no, he says crazy stuff, so what you're saying about him is invalid. I want you to engage what the point Andrew's making, which is there is a gap. It's the relationship between the model and the story, the relationship between, okay, Sandy gave an example about an ex-husband, and you were very adamant, say, yeah, he was wrong. Yes, but him realizing that he was wrong is him being right. So that relationship of him going from being wrong to being right was engaging with Sandy, speaking to her and checking the model he's got in his brain with the model she's got, and coming to
checking the model against objective reality. Yeah, I like that.
It's not against objective
Check the
reality.
model against, well, as best as you can match up to it. Okay.
That's just another model, right? It's an infinite regressive model.
Well, I understand that, but that gets back to the solipsism and the radical relativism that I'm trying to oppose here. Yeah, trying to oppose here. Yeah, people can be wrong. But it would be the mark of insanity not to adjust your model. You know, there's a speeding coming at you when you're walking across the street. So our brains don't perfectly map onto reality, but we wouldn't have survived as a species if our brains didn't map onto reality at all. You know, I can tell the difference between a rattlesnake and a garden hose. Okay. There has to be some kind of way to test this stuff. That's why I advocate science. And, you know, science teaches us things about how the world works.
I don't think anyone here is against science.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's the supremacy of science that I think a lot of people.
Well, I think it's that, Noah, I want you to talk, but it's that science has to know what to look at and what to study and what tests to run, which is all about salience. So how do you know you're paying attention to the right things and doing the right tests and looking, and how many tests are reproducible? T-Grog, we've done studies on that. How does funding for tests work?
Well, those are all problems, but I'm trying to think of the alternative. People just sitting around and meditating upon, you know, their navel or something. Science.
Just because you can't understand something doesn't mean it's not understandable.
When I was a little kid, I'm going to tell you a science story here. When I was a little kid, polio, man, that was a horrible disease. People in iron lungs, people crippled, maimed. Yeah, polio's gone, at least in this country, because of science, not because some guy in a cave was meditating somewhere. This reduces human suffering. Now you say, well, why value the reduction of human suffering? Because I'm a human and I don't want to suffer. Or I don't want the people become crippled or maimed. Science works. It works. Sit around, you know, thinking about, you know, whatever your internal mental states are. That's a dead end. We did that for the whole Dark Ages. We did all that. That's been tried.
Noah, yeah, get in here.
Yeah. I think one thing that we need to address is that science is a tool, just like moral intuitions are a tool, right? They're fallible to a certain extent because they can't capture everything. My moral intuitions won't always tell me what's right. Science can't tell me everything about the universe. Just like you were saying, like polio. How do I know to study polio versus a random bug in the middle of the ocean, right?
Because it's killing people and crippling them. Maybe that's why.
Maybe the bug cures polio.
Yeah, like
How do you know it's polio killing before you discovered polio?
Well, what happened was people got sick, and then because people developed a protocol in science to figure out what's making them sick. Okay, I think it's the Koch protocol. You determine what bacteria and viruses are causing the illness. Okay, it's a scientific protocol. I suppose you could call exorcists in and try and get rid of it that way, but that doesn't work. See, I keep coming back to this because Hegel and all this stuff. That's a trap. All this philosophizing and stuff, these grand systems that people create, Kant, Hegel, these are, it's a dead end. They don't make any progress.
So I want one moderating comment, and then I want to hear Noah what you have to say again too. So this goes into what I was talking about a little bit earlier before I open up the stream, but to Wesley or to you, T. Grog, we can't have these conversations every time you come on. We can't debate science and its validity to religion every time you come on, or else it's a completely colonizing thing that I don't want these live streams to turn into.
Well, I understand. I'm just here to try and defend rationality and
but we can't do that every time. I see it.
But I'm willing to listen.
Yeah. But so far every time you've come on, this is the conversation. And it just can't be that every time. It's fine sometimes. I'm not saying we have to stop talking about it now.
I understand that. Yeah.
Well, I don't want anyone to do that. Anyone's pet project, it can't be that every time. Because I come on and talk for a while about all my thoughts, but then when other people come on, I have to stop talking about what I exclusively want to talk about all the time.
Okay. That's fine.
Noah.
Yeah. I don't know. Going back to this whole, I don't disagree that science was able to cure polio and there was no better way of solving that. But not all of our problems are science-based or material-based, right? I think I don't know what you say to a psychopath who doesn't kind of have the ability to relate to others in the same way as we do. How to be able to tell them that purely through science that you should be concerned about somebody else's suffering. This seems like a problem that is way out of bounds for science to even address.
Or if people are not a problem that I get into too, to tag onto that with like the Sam Harrises or even like the Brett Weinsteins of the world, is they'll talk about science in a way. It's like almost a parallel to like Vervaeke talking about philosophy and religion. It doesn't scale. Like if only the smart people who understand the science are the people that can understand things, then essentially you have like the priestly class. This is the C.S. Lewis thing of science are the priests of the modern age that tell everybody else what to do. And then there's useful idiots that support them. And then there's the plebeians below them that just have to follow everything they say because they're not smart enough to understand the astrophysics or the advanced biological, physiological chemistry.
I would argue that I don't, and Grog, you can correct me, but I don't think that's exactly what you're saying. I think if I was gonna like steelman his point, I think science is the best way of doing this. Of solving all these issues, and even though it's not done correctly right now, if it was done correctly, like fully, we would be able to solve a lot of these problems. But my argument is that like there are problems that science can't solve. They don't have the tools able to address them.
Can you think of an example?
I think moral problems, I think, are a big one. But Andrew, you can go.
I was going to say just our government. Science cannot, our governmental structures and what's right, what's wrong, what should be talked about, what isn't, it cannot solve that because it's literally breaking down the meaning crisis. That's the other point then. You could look to science. Well, why was polio solved? Because people who were affected and touched by polio were like, I'm going to freaking get an answer to this because the people's lives who touched me. That's it. That's what science tries to objectify everything. But the subject still comes in. The subject still comes in and affects it. And that's the point that Hegel and all the German idealists are like, well, how can we have the subject not affected? Because it keeps coming in, it keeps rupturing in. And that's Lacan's point, is that no, the subject still gets enjoyment from whether jacking up the system or making the system work. The enjoyment of the subject still comes in. Desire is still there. And still science is trying to, I think that's the other point, is that at some point where if we play this all out, then it's like AI come in, solve the subjective problem that is human beings, because we are monstrous and we still affect it. We're collapsing the system. Science needs to solve it, and it can't get there. It's been, many, many years, and that's the point. What is it? What Luke's talking about with the subject object, the consciousness object divide that we cannot break. That's what philosophy has been struggling with forever, and it's like it's not breaking, and it's now affecting us the most. But sorry, little rant
away.
Well, I know I'm not supposed to talk anymore, but
No.
I would just say this: science is studying consciousness. There's a vast literature about it. It's, by the way, the moral problem. That's a big problem, but moralists have been arguing about that for centuries. Okay, the idea that it's just hopeless, I would say my viewpoint is science has no limits. If there's a phenomenon that has a measurable effect in the real world, the material, the world we're in, science can look at it. Science has discovered planets orbiting around distant stars. Science has discovered neutrinos and exotic particles. So
these are people. It wasn't science.
Yeah,
those are people. And I just want to it would be cool if we could take turns pretending like we are an authority, and if everyone around could just be okay, let's treat this person like they're an authority, and let's ask, maybe they know something I don't know. It would be cool if we took turns doing that, because I feel like that's ultimately it just drives me nuts that there's authority being given to so many things, but all of a sudden the people that are talking we don't care about the authority, that they might know something I don't know.
Yeah.
And they might know, I might not even like it.
I think that's good.
But T-Grog, you might not even I might know something that would make life so good for you, but you're not going to like it. And I don't even know how I can tell it to you to get you to like
I probably don't listen as well as I could. That's very
But
true.
I'm saying it's not just you, it's me, it's everyone. We all do this thing where we think that it's we're just giving authority based on our experience in life. And then we will be tempted to dismiss the other person and what gift they might have for you today.
I don't want to seem dismissive of anybody here. And I don't dislike anybody here.
Right. Well,
I don't.
I actually think it comes from love.
I'm interested in ideas, guys.
I think that what it really comes from is love.
People are modified apes. They don't think very well. I don't think very well.
You want the world to be a better place.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what all of us want, is the world to be a better
place.
Right. And then we have disagreements about, well, how do we do that?
Or what better is.
And that's cool.
Or what better is, exactly.
Yeah. It's look, you guys are cool. You're nice
I wrote this thing in the private chat. I said, connect with me if you want to solve problems. I said to T-Grog, connect with me if you want to solve problems. That's the answer, T-Grog. Prove me wrong.
No, I think that's the ideal. That's the ideal. Is to try to make the world a better place for everybody.
I took my turn. I'm going to let someone else have a turn.
No, that was beautiful. Because to T-Grog's point, you can do that. I think it's these external authorities all the time, but it's always respect and belief is always personal, because it's just which authorities do you trust and which ones do you respect? And a lot of that is even beyond your will. So you could do that and externalize your authorities within a religious context. You could do that within a scientific context. But then T-Grog, I know you asked this question in the private chat a while ago. What was it? It was something like, it was really early on. It was like, why are religious people not objectively more moral than other people? Because they don't believe the shit they say they believe. That's why. Because they're lying to themselves about the stuff they believe. I think the world is full of religious people that don't believe what they say they believe.
Look, I don't ever want people to get the impression. When I was a Christian, I hated other people for what they believed. So I don't do that anymore because people have people. I don't
That's
think
a
people.
hilarious. That's a hilarious comment. That just cracks me up. Like you're like,
Yeah,
that's
I don't
like
think people
a
choose
good
beliefs.
Well, that's just a funny one, like a stand-up comedian, because like it just sounds so funny. When I was a Christian, I hated.
Well, do I not hate them that hate thee, oh God?
But my
That's
point
in
is, like, I
Psalms.
don't like a Christian loves God and loves their neighbors as themselves and loves everyone up to and including their enemy, right? And so to say when I was a Christian I hated, is like it's just hilarious.
But even within Judaism, I mean, you're not to create, the 10 Commandments. You're not supposed to create an image of God. And so, like, if you are, I mean, Chezi's in here, but I think he would say that if you are hating the other and calling that love of God, then you're not loving God.
I just want to say Andrew left, and I liked everything Andrew was saying. Like,
great.
He was. I liked it because there's this contradiction or this back and forth between like the story and the model. It's like it's the holding the two contradicting things simultaneously, being able to juggle two things at once, and trying to update both the update story, update model. I loved it. Good job, Andrew.
Yeah, this quote from Chezi is fantastic. To quote the Pope, science can purify religion from error and superstition. Religion can purify science from idolatry and false absolutes. There's a Cliff Notes. That's great.
Tigro, do you believe that science has idolatry and false absolutes in it?
Science is a human endeavor, so there's always problems with any human endeavor. Okay. Our genetics is literally 98.5% chimp. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes, a lot of double dealing, a lot of lying, a lot of prevarication.
There's
going to be a lot of problems.
Those mistakes, are they just the natural results of the imperfection of our physical ontology, or is there those mistakes? Is there like a moral plane where those mistakes happen, or is everything just a playing out of the genes?
Well, that's a good question. I happen to be a compatibilist as far as free will goes. If you accept the fact that people are not, from my perspective, sinners and wicked and evil and suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, that they're just primates. They make a lot of mistakes. Their brain is a product of evolution. People make mistakes, and science is not immune from mistakes. Science has been wrong about, things in the past, and it'll be wrong about things in the future.
So
sorry, go on, Luke.
So just a quick question. If like what Chezi said is true, that science can purify religion of superstition and then religion can purify science of false absolutes and all that, why do you harp on science so much? Like, if we're all just apes and we can be wrong about any human enterprise, why highlight science so much?
Well, because science makes progress, and the world today is much better in at least materially and in terms of reduction of human suffering, I would say.
But that's faith. See, here's the thing that
the world is a better place. We don't torture people to extract confessions out of them. We don't.
I will push back. T-Grog, may I push back on that?
Sure.
This is something that, like, Steven Pinker will say, like, the world is better and better and better. There's less suffering. No, there's not. There's less suffering in the Western world because we just ship it over to the other side of the world. Sex trafficking, cobalt mines in Africa, I mean, there's suffering all over the place. We've just shoved it out with our affluence and our globalist imperialism. But
Oil.
there's tons of suffering all over.
Well, I would say this: there's a point to what you say. However, if you read about the history of the world, literally the history of the world 400 years ago, 500 years ago, it was all crappy everywhere. Okay, look at infant mortality. Let's take infant mortality. That's a measurable thing. Infant mortality. I mean, before the rise of modern science, 50% of children died before the age of 6 of malnutrition, smallpox, diphtheria, cholera. I mean, okay.
If I could be the king of the scientists, we'd do even better. That's my
Yeah,
claim.
I'm just, you look at measurable things like infant mortality, unless you think infant mortality is a good thing.
Well, I think there is a presupposition.
Infant mortality is way down. People don't die of tuberculosis anymore.
It could be better. It could be way better.
In the United States. People die of old age diseases like I'll get cancer, your heart will give out, something like that.
I would say it should be way better. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Also, it's not necessarily completely true what you're saying about and the saying in the United States. Every time you say that, it points to what Luke is saying. The United States is one country out of an entire world. I'm in Canada. Same can be said in Canada. Used to drive me buggy when I'd hear it in sermons. Oh, we are so lucky because blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, what about the other people? What about the people here even that you don't see? There's human trafficking here. Don't be naive. I mean,
there's a lot of not suffering in Dubai. How did those buildings get built?
Yeah.
By slaves from India.
and infant mortality in these days, sorry if this takes it into a place nobody else likes, but one of the things I question people on is some of the abortion statistics. I lost 3 babies before I had mine. Had my 3rd loss listed as a DNC abortion because it was because it's reflecting the tool, the process, because I didn't pass it. It was decomposing. I'm very sorry. Rather unpleasant. Also not good for health of mother or rest of family or anything. Those don't get listed as infant mortality rates. They get listed as something else, all 3 of those. And when I look at some of the various different people who are talking about how we talk at cross purposes, especially going back to some of the woke things, because of some of my intersection of because of my family's dynamics and because of some of the intersection between who makes up my family and what everybody's faced, I look at some of the things, I'm like, this is not so black and white. It's not so simple. Like I'd have a friend on the Facebook who'd always go, I used to be a nurse and every vaccine kills your children. Your child has autism because of this. And I'm thinking, yes. And if I'd had my child in the 50s, it would have been because I was a cold mother. Like science moves. That's what I've said. We're still learning how to track things. We can't keep quoting ourselves without having some humility about it. We just can't, because basically, whether you're talking religion or science, we're quoting ourselves on stuff. And the whole thing I liked about what Hezi said was that it's supposed to balance everything out. And that goes back to what Luke was saying at the beginning, listening to each other, letting Noah talk, letting Andrew talk, all of these things. Everybody has something slightly different they have had to face and know about the world. And we can't keep quoting, oh, because X, this is true. Oh, because Y, that is true. No, it's a dynamic. It really is.
I want to hear, I'll hear.
Thank you, Sandy. Amen.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wow.
that was great. I want to quote a Radiohead. I want to just read the lyrics of a Radiohead song. How about that? This is from their album, OK Computer, and it's called Fitter, Happier. So fitter, happier, more productive, comfortable, not drinking too much, regular exercise at the gym 3 days a week, getting along better with your associate, employee, contemporaries, at ease, eating well, no more microwave dinners and saturated fats, a patient, better driver, a safer car, baby smiling in the back seat, sleeping well, no bad dreams, no paranoia, careful to all animals, never washing spiders down the plug hole, keep in contact with old friends, enjoy a drink now and then, will frequently check credit at moral bank, hole in the wall, favors for favors, fond but not in love, charity standing orders, on Sunday ring road supermarket, no killing moths or putting boiling water on the ants, car wash also on Sundays, no longer afraid of the dark or midday shadows, nothing so ridiculously teenage and desperate, nothing so childish, at a better pace, slower and more calculated, no chance of escape, now self-employed, concerned but powerless, an empowered and informed member of society. Pragmatism, not idealism, will not cry in public, less chance of illness, tires that grip in the wet, shot of a baby strapped in back seat, a good memory, still cries at a good film, still kisses with saliva, no longer empty and frantic, like a cat tied to a stick that's driven into frozen winter shit. The ability to laugh at weakness, calm, fitter, healthier, and more productive. A pig in a cage on antibiotics. There's what a lot of modernity has given us. You say longevity, life expectancy. How about quality of life? Just because you have a pulse doesn't mean you're alive.
That's the deep thing that T. Grug, he doesn't really understand when we talk about depth, and that has to do with quality. And
I have a
quality is
fantastic
mystery.
quality of life. I don't know what you guys are doing,
Can it be deeper?
but
Can it be more?
I have
Can
an
it,
amazing quality of life. Amazing.
Not everyone does, though.
Well, I understand that the world's an imperfect place, but if you go back 400 years, a lot of people had a much, much, much worse quality of life.
do you enjoy a banana as much as I do?
I don't believe that.
Well, that's a good question. You don't believe people 400 years ago didn't have a bad quality of
No,
life?
I don't think that's objectively true. It's like everyone who talks about
don't?
liberalism. No, it's like everybody talks about liberalism and democracy being the best form of government. I think we'll see. People always talk about like communism and fascism has killed more people than liberalism, and I say we'll see.
Well, yeah, I don't think anybody in this stream would go back, would trade living now in 21st century America to living in, let's say, the 14th century in France, unless you're a king. And even the kings didn't live like we do.
Maybe I was there.
They
We are
didn't live
essentially
like
the
we do.
kings, right, of the modern age, the affluent, and we're all miserable on drugs, on medication.
I'm not on drugs.
Yeah, but as a
I
rule,
drink coffee. That's it.
T-Grog.
I don't drink alcohol. I'm not in despair. I'm not
What about
crying
the-
every
You want to
night.
talk about statistics, though? You're talking about personalism right now. What about statistics?
Well, I'm just saying that this broad generalization that everybody's depressed and it's meaning crisis, and I think it's, I just don't see it.
Well, I
don't
do.
see it.
That's-
I've been where T. Grug's at. I think I've been where T. Grug's at, guys.
No, what do you got to say?
Well, I just graduated college last year, right? And I see all the people around me, and they're all looking for something, and they can't find it. And you know, you have your clubs, but they're, you know, they don't provide real community, and so everybody's really depressed, and half of the student body is on antidepressants, and like for them, life sucks, and they have everything, right? They have college paid for. They have all the free time in the world. They don't need to work. But man, like they're still depressed, and there's nothing, like they need meaning, and they don't have it. And so I know that you don't see it, right? But like it doesn't mean it's not there. It's objective.
The statistics are bad. Teenage kids, people in their 20s, is bad.
You can look at this stuff objectively. I live in Utah, okay? Mormonville Central. These people are devotees of church. It's a high demand religion. They have families. Families are forever. They're for eternity. You're eternally married, okay? And you have eternal children with you. And all this, they have a religion. They have families. The antidepressant use here among women is off the charts. Off the charts. So they have religion, they have families, and they're still using antidepressants.
So why?
So the idea that, well, if you just had X, then this would solve the problem. I think it's wrong.
I wasn't saying that, but I also, where was that when you were saying it before, right? You said that like you don't see the meaning crisis happening, but it seems like you have an instance right at the top of your head of something that.
But
that
they have everything you guys would say is meaningful. They have religion, they have a family, and they're still.
You're talking to a model of us. I think you just talked to a model of us, T. Grug. Like you've got a model of us in your head.
So what's the solution of the meaning crisis? You're completely correct. I'm jumping the gun. What's the solution? What is this? You guys know the solution, right?
Well, I think there's interior knowing and there's exterior
if there
knowing,
is one.
Right? So you're looking at all these people from the outside and you're seeing what they have, but you don't know their story. Like, and maybe you do know somebody's story, but not everybody's. But like on the grounds, like I'm talking to people, so I'm seeing the external, but then I'm also trying to get insight into the internal lives. And so I think that's what maybe is missing, is like part of finding the solution is both processing the exterior kind of statistics, but then also hearing the story of the person and knowing their interior insights. Even though they might have like food, they might still feel like they don't have enough. And that is an interior reality that isn't like something that you can change with an exterior solution.
Yeah, I don't think there's some sort of universal prescription for all people. I've said that a lot. Like religion's going to help a lot of people. It's not going to help some. It's going to make it worse for a lot of people too.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. Most of the people in jail are religious.
Yeah. Well, Paul has talked about that. PVK has said he's never met a homeless person that didn't believe in God.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, if they're meaning crisis and people feel this, when I left religion, I certainly had a meaning crisis, but fortunately for me, I could do cognitive therapy and read and think about it and, talk to other people, figure out why I feel sad or feel angry or feel depressed. I can empathize with the lady here. I grew up with a bunch of alcoholics. Okay. So my mother's an alcoholic. My dad's an alcoholic. 3 of my grandparents are alcoholics. These are all alcoholics. So I've got this programming in my head to rescue people or take care of people or whatever. And you have to work through that. I agree with you. There's certain things you have to deal with on an individual basis because we're all individuals. Okay. So I can't prescribe things for other people and say, well, you should just do this. And for you guys, I mean, I think religion is helpful to you guys. I don't see anything particularly noxious about it. Like hellfire or kill people who are witches or things like that. But I think that in a roundabout way, I agree with Noah. I mean, people get depressed, they feel sad, and community does help. My daughter's been clean and sober for 10 years. She's an AA. I go to meetings with her. That's community. It helps her. So yeah, it's good. That's good. That's a good thing.
I just want to say bye real fast. Thank you all for talking. Have a great one. Thank you, T. Grog, for sharing and everything. So I love you all.
Noah.
Yeah, listen, I'm not trying to be an asshole here, okay? I appreciate that Luke, I don't want to monopolize things here. I just like when I was a Baptist and when I was a kid, I got gaslit so much by either alcoholics or religious fanatics that I am very cautious about what I perceive as unclear thinking or relying on, internal mental states. So I apologize. I don't want to be an asshole. I can't be an asshole. So
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got to go too, guys, but thank you for everything and good luck with you for all of you on your journeys. I really appreciate your comments.
I love you being here, T. Grug.
If I was abrupt or nasty or something, my deepest apologies. I'll try to do better.
Appreciate you, T. Grug.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
You just have an intensity of opinion. And I think, like you said, maybe you don't listen always 100% the way you want to. That's not a bad thing. And it's, I think that if you notice that and you hang out, then you do grow.
I do empathize with you. I had a girlfriend who was borderline, and I had to go for psychiatric help after that. So you're a saint, girl. You're a saint.
Not everybody would. Good for you.
You're a saint.
Nah. But thanks.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, I gotta go soon too, but yeah, that was fun. Thanks, Gavin. I assume you can close this up when one of you guys can when I leave, because
I think Luke's in the background and we'll just end it as it ends naturally.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here, Sandy.
I'm glad I jumped on, even though I was still feeling that wooziness from.
I've been waking up and like eating some fruit, and it like adds sugar to my system, and my brain starts kicking in. It's like, warming up the car or something.
Yeah. Are you leaving us?
Tayo's headed out. All right. It's probably a good time, I guess.
I think so. I do have things I'm also supposed to be doing in the tangible realms.
Have a good day, Sandy.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later, Gavin.